Today, August 24th, marks 30 years since Windows 95 was released. Probably the most hyped up and marketed OS launch in history. There has already been countless retrospectives on the launch and the OS as a whole. I want to do something a little bit different. We're going to be seeing how well Windows 95 runs on the officially listed minimum system requirements. I've done this before with Windows XP, twice actually, but I've been meaning to do it with Windows 95 ever since that first video. Given it's now the 30th anniversary, I feel it's finally time I get down to actually doing so. Windows 95 launched in a pretty interesting time for computer hardware. It released just as CPU speeds began to skyrocket. The 486 still ruled the mainstream market, but the Pentium was starting to gain steam with the average consumer. Microsoft didn't include any recommended requirements, well, other than 8 MB of RAM, but I would say there was an implied recommendation of a 486. Plus, on these later 1997 copies I have that came bundled with Internet Explorer 4.0, it says that a 486 DX266 is recommended for that. So take that for what you will. And while the 486 was dominant, there was still a decent user base running older 386 machines. Even though the 386 launched all the way back in 1985, Microsoft didn't want to exclude those customers. They were reaching as far and as wide as they possibly could with 95. They wanted every PC feasibly possible to be running their latest and greatest. So they kind of had to include the 386 as an option, as they were still popular sellers into the early 90s. We should probably nail down what exactly Microsoft lists as the requirements before we go on any further, just so we're all on the same page. And remember, this is what Microsoft officially put on the back of the box, not the actual or theoretical minimum. I got a lot of people that were confused about that with the XP videos, so just so we're clear. First up, we have an Intel 386 DX or higher processor, 4 MB of RAM, 45 MB of available hard drive space, VGA graphics or higher, a mouse, MS-DOS 3.31 or later, Windows 3.0 or later, and wait, OS2 2.0 or higher. Yeah, I'd have to take a look at that OS2 upgrade path at some point. We're going to be using this, my 386 machine I built on the channel a few years ago. However, there are some kind of asterisks with the machine, so bear with me. Microsoft chose to omit any clock speed rating for the CPU, so really any 386 would fly here, even an SX, though that would dip below the official specs. I imagine most likely they were aiming at people with 33 or 40 MHz systems, but since they don't list a minimum speed, I await all the comments telling me I should be using a 16 or 20 MHz 386. But sorry, that's just not gonna happen. We're sticking with the 33 MHz AMD 386 DX that we already have in the machine. And don't worry, there's basically no difference between the AMD and Intel 386s. 4 MB of RAM. Ouch. Yeah, even for 3.1, 4 MB wasn't a crazy amount, but it was usable for sure. But for Microsoft's next-gen 32-bit OS to be using only 4 MB of RAM, they must have been doing some crazy voodoo-like optimizations and heavy page file abuse to get that to work. I'm starting to fear that my hard drive may not survive this. Normally I run this machine with 8 MB, but I've gone ahead and taken out half the RAM just to, match the spec and all that. The video card is kind of hard to hit the minimum with. I don't have any standard VGA cards, and the card in here now is a Super VGA card. I have swapped in, however, the most underwhelming thing I could find, a Trident TVGA 9000i with 512K of RAM. Still better than what a lot of systems probably would have had, but it doesn't have GUI acceleration, which is key, so it'll be extra slow. And we could always run Windows in 16 color mode for the true experience if we really wanted to. There's also a few other things in the computer that aren't mentioned in the requirements at all. First of which is a sound card. Okay, well, it is technically listed on the box, but it's definitely not a requirement. This is a Jazz 16 based sound card, so it's basically a Sound Blaster 16, except it isn't quite compatible. The next is a math coprocessor. This was before the days of x86 CPUs having floating point units built directly into the CPU, so Intel along with other companies offered companion chips that would drastically accelerate floating point math. Our board has a ULSI MathCode chip on it. Now, I don't think that Windows itself would benefit a ton from an FPU, but honestly, I have no idea. There's no way for me to disable it in the BIOS, and there's no jumper I can find on the board that turns it off. So the only option would be pulling it out, which really sucks on these kinds of sockets, so that's not going to happen. And finally, the third thing, which will most likely have an impact, is the cache. 386s typically don't have any built-in cache, but motherboards often had the option to add it on. Mine is configured with 64 kilobytes, not a ton, but enough that it will be noticeable. Thankfully, the BIOS has an option to disable it, so we'll be able to see what impact it has on 95. Normally, I run this computer off a compact flash card with a secondary mechanical hard drive for all the fun sounds. And I was going to use a CF card until I realized that with how much disk swapping is going to be occurring, a flash card would give the machine an unfair advantage it would have never had back in the day. So for the primary drive, I have swapped in an 85 megabyte Western Digital Caviar 280, and the secondary drive is still the 100 megabyte Seagate ST3120. This should be a little bit more representative of the average 386 system, though I don't think dual drives would have really been all that common. And now I think is a good time to move on to one of my main points with this video. How many people actually upgraded their 386 machines to Windows 95? Surely it couldn't have really been that many, right? First off, the upgrade copy was $89. You can do the inflation conversion yourself, but no matter the time period, $89 is still not an insignificant amount of money to drop on such an old and fairly outdated machine. Honestly, if you were already running Windows 3.1, I don't see why you would have upgraded. Sure, 95 is a massive improvement over 3.1, but it's not like 3.1 is bad or anything. It's a completely serviceable OS, and I just don't think the upgrade cost would have really been worth it for most people. Now, if you didn't have Windows at all and were running just straight DOS on your computer, I think the value gets a bit trickier. You'd have to buy the full version of 95, which would be around $200, but you could finally move off of DOS and do some real multitasking, though we haven't really seen what you can do with such a small amount of RAM. The scenario that I think makes the most sense is if you were upgrading from Windows 3.0. This might not have been as uncommon as you might think, since Windows 3.0 was the primary GUI people would have been getting on their computers between 1990 and 1991, which is also when the 386 was selling very well in the market. Now, if you've only ever used Windows 3.1, you might be wondering why I'm suddenly going back on what I said about 3.1 being just fine. Well, you kind of have to use both to understand what I mean, but 3.1 is actually a pretty big upgrade over the original 3.0. 3.0 just kind of has this crusty sort of feel to it. Like it just feels older and less refined, which makes sense given that it came out 2 years earlier and can even run on XT class machines. 3.1 requires a 286, but was definitely targeting 386 and 486 machines. 3.0 also has much more limited graphics driver support, so you're most likely going to be stuck in 16 color mode. It has no sound capabilities whatsoever, with the exception of the very specific multimedia extensions version, which most people didn't have. The UI is just less refined, with I think the biggest issue being the clunkier file manager, and probably the biggest issue, its software base is tiny compared to 3.1. Sure, 3.0 looks really impressive compared to what 2.0 and 1.0 had to deal with, but it doesn't have anywhere near as many programs available for it compared to 3.1. So if you upgraded to 95 from 3.0, you'd basically fix all of those issues in one go. Plus you'd also get access to new 32-bit Windows 95 applications as well. Sounds pretty appealing to me at least. And this is all, of course, being based off, the presumption that, well, you actually bought the thing. While online piracy for operating systems wasn't really much of a thing yet, just given how big the file sizes were, but disk sharing and disk copying most certainly were. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there weren't a bunch of friend groups who all just went in together and bought just one copy of 95 and just passed the disks around. And even though the 95 floppies were slightly harder to copy, the custom DMF format Microsoft used was pretty quickly figured out. So with a 20-pack of Maxells and a shareware copy of WinImage, everyone could have their own copy of 95. And I imagine this is how most 386s that got 95 were upgraded. Very few probably were actually legitimate. But I think I've rambled on long enough. Let's actually get the computer hooked up and get to upgrading to 95. Here we are. So we do have DOS 6.2.2. Ideally, like DOS 5 would probably be a little bit more accurate, or maybe an earlier version of DOS 6, but it's not really going to make that big of a difference. So we're just sticking with good old DOS 6.2.2. Here on the main drive, we have about 50 megabytes of free space, which is within the limit. The minimum is 45 megabytes free. And there are a couple, programs that I have on here. And this is, of course, on the 85 megabyte Western Digital drive. Over here on the 100 megabyte Seagate drive, we have all my games that I normally have on the system. We have about 55 megabytes free on this. So, about 180 megabytes of total hard drive space, I think is probably pretty accurate for, most 386s. And then, of course, we have Windows 3.0. Now, I don't think I've ever actually seen anyone upgrade from 3.0 to 95 before, so this will be kind of a first for me. And of course, 3.0 is just kind of... I do really like the aesthetic. Like, obviously, the chess wallpaper is very iconic, and I do kind of like these icons. These, not that the 3.1 icons are bad by any means, but I don't know, there's just an aesthetic to them. With that said, I vastly prefer 3.1. Like I mentioned, the file manager is just kind of clunkier and worse. But we do have some programs installed here. Obviously, we got all the default Windows 3 applications, which in theory should be carried over to 95. So we will still have Reversi, and I have added on a few other programs just because I'm curious to see how they will run under 95. We have this interesting CPU usage little meter that just kind of lives down here, which I didn't know anything like this existed for Windows 3.0. I can't imagine it's all that accurate, but it's a nice thought. We got a Windows zip program, and then we got this, which is supposed to be an image viewer, which complains, of course, because we don't have a higher bit depth for our color. And unfortunately, I have tried to put other bitmaps on here. I haven't been able to, probably because, the formats and stuff have changed a little bit. But it does actually work with JPEGs, at least really old ones. And you can see this takes quite a long time because I think it's trying to decode it down to 16 color. So yeah, 16 color obviously doesn't look very good at all. And then lastly, we have this little Windows clock utility, which, I mean, it's just a clock, although it's a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit more convenient than the default Windows clock. Although it doesn't have the absolutely epic green digital display, so, I mean, really, which one's better? And then lastly, we got Word for Windows 2.0, and I'm pretty sure this is the latest version of Word that works on Windows 3.0. Now, this was all part of Microsoft Office, although it wasn't like all one centralized program. They were just all these separate programs, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, that were just bundled in one box together, and you installed them all separately. So I just have Word installed. Now, I want to see if our theming carries over to 95. Obviously, I've set our chess wallpaper. However, I have also set a custom color scheme, which I believe is, yes, this Arizona theme. And that's another thing that I really don't like about 3.0. You can't just click on the box of a drop-down. You have to actually click the arrow to be able to change your option. I really, really dislike that. But we've already done plenty of introduction already. We need to get installing. Now, we will be installing Windows 95 using, of course, the floppy disk version. I don't actually have a legitimate floppy disk version, so I had to write out 13 floppies, which was, of course, very fun to deal with. And we can't use the CD-ROM version, of course, because, well, we don't have a CD drive. Most 386s didn't have CD drives, so that's kind of why the floppy disk version exists. In fact, there was a lot of 486 systems that didn't have CD drives either, so it is worth noting that there is a 5¼ inch floppy version of the 95 upgrade, which you had to get from Microsoft via mail order. And I did think about trying to do that, but I would have had to buy discs to get that many, because I think it's like 14 or 15 discs. All right, I believe we could launch this from within DOS and it would also work, but we're gonna, of course, launch this within Windows. Wait, what? Okay, Windows setup requires Microsoft Windows version 3.1 or later. Quit Windows and type setup/d at the MS-DOS prompt. Okay, I didn't know you couldn't run it from within 3.0, but I guess we're running it from within DOS and it'll just detect that Windows was already installed. That's a little bit more lame, but okay. I wonder why it needs the /d command. Will it show help options of what D actually does? No, it doesn't. There's ID, which is skip disk space check. Okay. All right, fairly standard. It's gonna run ScanDisk. Not enough free extended memory to run setup. How much memory is available? Oh, okay, we don't have enough. I guess we're delving into AutoExec stuff. Hey, there we go. All right, so what I had to do was I remarked out ENM 386 from my config sys, and that freed up enough extended memory that we now can actually load the setup. There's not enough disk space for a typical installation of Windows. To set up a compact version of Windows, click OK. Oh, apparently you can get it down to 24 megabytes? Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, we're probably not going to be able to install, like, anything, pretty much, which is going to really suck, but hopefully we can at least install some of the default 95 programs. Now, this would all be fixed if I just, had one larger drive, and, we had the 100-ish megabytes of free space that we have in total, but we just don't. And given that this is all off of floppies, and also given that it's a 386, which is having to decompress files and slow old hard drives, I imagine this setup is probably going to take a long time. All right, finally, after like 5 minutes of just 2 floppy disks, we're finally actually continuing on. All right, we're going to not do this, because we need as much space as possible. 6 megabytes doesn't sound like a lot, but we kind of need everything we can get. Wait a minute. They straight up lied on the box. It said 45 megabytes was required, but we need a minimum of 50.8 megabytes. Compact? They straight up lied on the box. I thought we were fine. Guess I guess I gotta reload the setup now and move some data around. All right, after some disk rearranging and deleting stuff, now we just get a warning, not a hard block. So we should be able to hopefully tune exactly what we want here. This is kind of a problem. Not even 3, we have 2 megabytes basically of space, and literally none of these are selected. Well, if we don't bring games over, because we already have Solitaire and Reversi, so Solitaire is kind of the main one we care about, although fortunately we don't get to choose individually between like Minesweeper and Hearts, so we do want the better Windows Paint, so I think we're going to select that. Oh, interesting, that only bumps it up by 0.2 megabytes? Okay. Desktop wallpapers would be certainly nice to have, although we already have our very cool chess wallpaper. Let's get the modern calculator. Yeah, we can get the screensavers. Might as well. All right, so we still have like a megabyte free. That's better than I thought. We could use disk compression. Well, that pushes us over anyways, but no. on a 386, just no. We got 0.6 megabytes left. The volume control is 0.1 megabytes. All right. Sound recorder. Let's get the media player. Don't think we need anything from communications. But yeah, okay, so we're not quite as out of stuff here as I thought we might be. And we'll get the resource monitor. Might as well. All right, so this is probably about as far as we can really go. Let's go ahead and continue. It does detect the Trident card, so that's very nice. We will be able to get higher color depth. And now begins the process of inserting the other, like, 11 floppies. All right, well, the installation is done. That took like an hour and 20 minutes just to do. I skipped the whole second part of the installation. There's no reason for that to be on video because it's literally the same. I'm really curious how long this is going to take to boot, given how long it took to install. Well, honestly, that's not terrible. It did save our chess wallpaper, so that's very nice. Here we are. Probably a little longer than an average boot. That was like a minute and a half at least. But it was still doing some installation stuff, so we'll do an accurate boot up time test in a little bit. There's a lot of activity on the hard drive. Okay, it kind of died down a little bit. Let's see, did we actually get sound? Now, the one thing about the floppy disk version, and we might not get it at all, given just how limited our installation is, the floppy disk version of 95 actually has very few sounds, like at all. Like I think there's actually only one sound, and it might be the chord? Definitely not fast, I can tell you that already. Oh, we get the Microsoft sound. Okay, so that's apparently the only sound we get. Okay, yeah, so we don't get any error sounds or anything like that, but at least we get the boot up sound, which of course is the most important one. So our wallpaper was saved. However, it doesn't look like our theme carried over because it's gray here and it's supposed to be like a lighter blue. Oh, okay. That was a very slow right-click menu. Things are not looking great so far. I gotta say. Ooh, all right. Can we, let's be so bold and open up 2 different windows. Let's see how that goes. Ooh. All right, 8386, it does detect the 387. Again, no idea if that has an impact on it or not. 4 megabytes of RAM. Honestly, with how slow this is, I don't think the CPU is really playing much of a role here. I think this is purely down to the RAM. Because that's bad. That's not great at all. So we got our wallpapers. I thought I didn't install the wallpapers. I guess these are just all the tiled ones. I think 95 does have a couple like fuller size bitmaps. And I guess those are the ones that didn't get installed. Let's see how the performance is on this. It's not great performance, but it does work. So that's, that's nice. Let's see what the Mystify looks like. Yeah, that's not... Oh, second one popped in finally. That's not bad. Honestly, that's pretty good. I think the Mystify one is my favorite. Now, of course, these are all 95 schemes. I don't think they carried any of them over from 3.0. Wow, that is taking a long time. Hard drive is grinding away. There we go. Okay, just put it in 16, but we should be able to go to 256. Oh. Oh, we're waiting. Oh, I have to restart? It can't even do it soft? Okay. Alright then. Sure, buddy. This probably isn't going to be a full system reboot. Windows 9X can kind of do yeah, it's doing that. Can do kind of like a halfway reset, where it's not fully rebooting the computer, but it just restarts the OS itself. Well, that wasn't a horrible reboot time. Supposedly we can go to 800 by 600 with 256 colors. Ooh, there's some like artifacting Little tiny bit of artifacting going on here. I don't know if that's what that's about. I don't know if that's like a VGA interference problem, or if this is just a Trident card is not very good card moment. Oh. Oh. Oh, okay. Bad. That's bad. I think this card might have some RAM issues. So I guess this card is not as functional as I hoped it was. That's a little unfortunate. So it just needed all that space, I guess, for the install, because we have 19 megabytes free. Probably because it uninstalled all the Windows 3.0 stuff for the most part. So that's rather nice. And of course our Seagate, we still have 50 megabytes free. All of our program groups have been carried over. We still got Reversi. I don't know how to play Reversi, honestly, but it's there. Windows applications. Let's see, what does WinClock do? Interesting. It doesn't show up the window, but it is showing the time down here. That's quite interesting, and I can't close it because you can't right-click on an object in the taskbar. Oh wait, no, you can, but it's not letting me close the clock. So I guess that's just open now. We got the card file. Got Notepad, we got WordPad. This is a painfully long load sequence. Well, it did load. After like 20 or 30 seconds. Yeah, this is not great. Like, the hard drive is just grinding away for no reason. It's finally stopped. Alright, I'm really curious to see how long it takes Word 2.0 to load. This is not like Word 95 or anything. This is old Word. Okay, that wasn't that bad. That was about 15 seconds. It definitely didn't take that long under Windows 3, I can tell you that. I'm gonna go ahead and reboot back into 16 color mode, and we'll kind of figure out what we're gonna do from this point on, because I figured it'd be bad, but this is definitely, we're in page file hell right now. Minute and a half, not stellar, but not terrible either. So that's whatever, I guess. But we are back in 16 color mode and the artifacting is gone, so it's probably just some bad memory chips on this card, which really sucks. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what to do from this point on. This is a lot worse than I was expecting it to be. I didn't think it'd be worse than XP on minimum requirements bad, because like XP on 64 megabytes of RAM is not good at all, but it's not like quite this bad. Well, it still works. Let's see if we can look at the resource monitor to see. I already know that there's going to be zero free physical memory available, but who knows? Maybe there's like a megabyte or two. May cause your computer to run more slowly. Dude, opening any window makes the computer run more slowly. Okay, I was expecting the one kind of from 98. I forgot 95's thing is like this. And this is completely useless to me, because this is clearly not true. It's probably like CPU time, not actually memory or even page file, so that's really helpful, guys. I guess we could see our CPU usage with the other thing, assuming it still works and is accurate. Oh, the mouse cursor froze for like a good half second there. And yeah, I don't think this this works. Probably just due to the way that probably just due to the way it works. Oh, okay. All right, buddy. That's good to know. Oh, it doesn't even show up. That's that's great. Hey, oh, okay, we've recovered, I guess, just Windows 9X things. I don't really have much software directly on hand to try on here, but we do have the Best of Microsoft Entertainment Pack. This does work on 3.1, but it doesn't work on 3.0, so this is technically a benefit of the upgrade. I do have the real disk for this, but it doesn't work anymore. And I tried rewriting the image, still doesn't work, so the media in here I think is bad. All right, let's go with Chips Challenge. Are we getting any music? There we go. Well, I mean, runs about as well as Chips Challenge can run. Maybe it's a little less responsive, like it just doesn't refresh the screen as quickly, but this is totally fine. Nice. But of course we gotta play the best entertainment pack game, that's Jizzball. Yeah. I think the balls are maybe a little less smooth than normal, but this is working fine. Okay, that was some lag when it tried to hit the wall. Okay, well, it doesn't help when I suck. It's not the smoothest, but it's definitely, you know, playable. Now, we haven't done any multitasking tests yet, which I think we need to. So let's go ahead and we're gonna open up Jizzball. We're just gonna have that, you know, going in the background. Let's open up Paint. Yeah, it's taken quite a while. Now, I don't know if Jizzball just pauses when it's in the background or not. But it is not responsive, I can tell you that. Okay, it does just pause whenever the window's not active. Alright, so we're already looking a little rough. Let's get some Word 2.0. A whopping 3 programs open, 2 of which are 16-bit Windows applications. So they're not even full 95 programs. That seems to be okay. It was right there. Jizzball is definitely stuttering a bit more than I think it was. Let's go back to Paint. Yeah, see, it basically has to reload the entire program in to memory anytime you switch between them. Let's open up Explorer. It's okay, buddy. Take your time. There we go. Ooh. Yeah, I think I think our page file is starting to get rather full. We only have 4 programs open right now, And one of them is just Windows Explorer, which is technically already open. Like, it's almost constant hard drive activity. Oh, come on, man. Well, our Jezball performance is still working, somewhat. That's nice. I don't think I can win this one. Nope. I'm not setting up the studio lighting in here, so you get this lighting. But anyways, now you might expect me to try out some, you know, actual 95 software, you know, some proper 32-bit stuff. You know, I basically just been doing old 16-bit software because that's just kind of what was already on it and what I had easy access to, but there's kind of a problem with doing actual 95 software on here. The first one is storage space. We don't exactly have a ton of storage space. Now, we do have about 65 megabytes free at the moment, split between our two hard drives. That's not entirely a big issue. You can definitely fit some software in that space, but I don't really know what, honestly, that would actually run on here. You know, we can't really do any gaming other than, like, Entertainment Pack, just because the machine is too slow. Like, this is a DOS gaming machine. This is not a Windows gaming machine in the slightest. And I'm pretty sure any creative or business type software probably not going to do very well on here, because that brings us to the second problem, which of course is the RAM. We've already seen how bad the multitasking on here is. Now, you'd think Microsoft Office 95 would be a great test. I mean, after all, this was the flagship companion piece of software with 95. I mean, it came out on the same day as 95. Microsoft marketed it heavily with 95. Its minimum requirements are a 386DX, but it's also 8 megabytes of RAM as the minimum. That's not the recommended. Considering that we're already maxed out on RAM, just basically running the OS, I think I'm probably going to agree with Microsoft that I don't think Office 95 is really going to work, at least not work well. It'd probably be constantly disk swapping, just having the program open and doing like anything within it. I don't think it'd be entirely unusable. I mean, you could probably struggle through it if you absolutely had to, but I'm not going to install it on here, at least not in the machine's current state, because, well, that brings us back to the disk size issue. I am not going to write out 24 Office 95 floppies just to see how it works on here. That's not happening. And I can't really copy the installation files to the hard drive and then just install it, because then there's not enough space for that. We're gonna have to do something else. And honestly, that something else is just gonna be upgrading the computer. Now, the CF card is mainly just for convenience factor. We don't really need this. I could keep running the hard drives if I really wanted to, but this is just going to make it so much easier because there's more storage space. 250 megabytes is still pretty much in the realm of believability for a 386, just it will give us faster access times, so we are going to be cheating a little bit, but we're going to go back to 8 megabytes of RAM because I really want to see what the 386 can do when it's not being hampered by such a low amount of RAM, because 8 megabytes for 95, it's not like super comfortable, but it's definitely usable. I mean, there were 486 and I think even some Pentium systems coming out in like 95 and even 96 with 95 that had only 8 megabytes of RAM. All right, so we are here now with 8 megabytes of RAM, and we are also running off of the compact flash card. It's still not the fastest. We are definitely being held back by the CPU, which is, I think, kind of, you know, obvious. You know, if we open up a lot of the same stuff here, even with 8 megabytes of RAM, the system is still not the quickest. And I have actually tried this already. We do still get disk swapping, even opening the same amount of stuff that we had before. So with just these three open, we can see, and I can look at the hard drive indicator, there's really no activity. So we are definitely not out of RAM yet. Or with 4 megabytes of RAM, we were already hitting the limit with just like 2 or 3 things open. But yeah, it's definitely not the quickest. And I think a lot of this probably is down to the CPU. A faster 386, like a 40 megahertz, would probably, you know, fare a little bit better. And with that said, I did go ahead and get Office 95 onto here. This is all of the files from the floppy disk version. And we should just barely have enough space to install this so we can get a rough idea of how well it performs. And we are back in 256 color mode, just to be clear. We're just going to deal with the slight amount of video corruption. So we actually don't have enough space free on the compact flash card for the typical install. So we're going to have to go custom, and we're going to have to try to trim it down. We have like 48, I think, megabytes free. And that's because the installer files are taking up the rest of the space. Well, that's a problem. Why is it trying to pull from disk 2? Because they dumped all the files into the same folder, and apparently it doesn't like that. We have Office 95, so let's see how that goes, I guess. Huh, well actually that loaded pretty quickly. Okay, well we don't need that. Yeah, we can type here and it works because it's Word. It's Word. I don't really know what else you'd want me to do with it. Let's go ahead and open up Excel. Why don't we? I do really like the Office 95 splash screens. Very nice looking. Well, that didn't take too long either. It's definitely not the fastest to, switch between them, but we can certainly do a thing. Thing 1. Thing 2. Let's see if we can make a graph. Let's do 3D bar. Let's do that. That looks like it'll be good. Oh yeah, look at that. We got thing 2 is doing really well here, but you can see cool 1 actually, thing 2, that's what we want. That's what we want here. Now let's see if we can go ahead and copy this, and let's see if we can paste this into Word. Actually, I don't know how you do that. Hey, there we go. So it's definitely not quick. You can't say that it doesn't work. It most certainly does. I can't really imagine trying to use this on 4 megabytes of RAM, which is probably why Microsoft said 8 megabytes was the minimum. I don't really know what else to do, honestly. I mean, that's kind of it for the video. I mean, we did the thing, but I just don't know what other software to even really test on here. Sure, I could do benchmarks, I guess, but we know it's going to be bad. Obviously, the 4 megabytes of RAM sucks. That's kind of a given. But I thought the 386 was going to be better in 95 than it actually was. I mean, I knew the 386 was outdated by this point. I thought it would have did a little better. Not that it was bad. It's usable, especially if you have 8 megabytes of RAM. I don't see the benefit of upgrading to 95 on a system like this, honestly. And so that really kind of answers my question of, no, in any situation, upgrading to 95 on a 386 system like this just didn't make any sense. Because honestly, other than 95, I guess being more stable than 3.1, which I mean is only kind of true if you're doing like a bunch of multitasking. It's not like Windows 3.1 was an unusable operating system by any means. People got by for many years on Windows 3. Sticking on that would have made more sense. Now, again, we did do the 3.0 straight to 95 upgrade path, which does give us more access to more programs from 3.1, and not so much from 95, because, well, just most of the stuff you're going to want to run isn't going to run well on the system anyways. All the 95 software was being designed with at least 486s in mind, probably a 486 DX2 at the minimum. You know, you could run it on less, but it's not going to be great. I mean, we saw what Office 95 was like. It's usable, and maybe if there were some features of like Office 95 that were really appealing to you, I would probably just stick with Windows 3 or 3.1 and just kind of tough it out and just save up money for a new computer anyways. And like, I was going to test with the cache turned off. I just didn't, because who cares? We already seen the machine is bad. You disable it, it's probably just going to make it a little bit worse. It's probably not going to be that visually noticeable. I did mess around with just, turning the turbo off, and predictably it feels like running Windows 95 on a 286. It's actually to the point of being pretty much unusable. Now, if you couldn't afford a new computer, but for whatever reason you really needed to keep updating your software, or you needed to be on 95 for some reason, I don't know what that reason would be, but maybe you did, and the 386 just isn't cutting it for you, there were options for you. There were drop-in 486 in quotes, because it's only kind of a full 486, into the motherboard. These were, I think, mostly made by Cyrix. There might have been another company that did it, but it's mostly Cyrix, and they just got, rebranded. This would drop in a mostly full 486 into a 386 board, and they had versions for both the 386 SX and DX. They're not full 486s because they don't have the full level 1 cache that a 486 does. I think they only have 1 kilobyte instead of the 8 that a 486 is supposed to have. So that would be an option. I've never messed around with one of those, so I don't really know what the performance benefit would be. The other thing is also, we have no Windows acceleration at all. If we had a Windows accelerator, that would definitely speed up Windows a lot. I mean, it would speed up Windows 3.1 as well. It'd do the same thing in 95, and we could have tested that. That might have helped, I don't know. But that's really unrealistic for a 386 to have, because that was not a cheap investment, especially in the early 90s. I mean, I'm sure a 486 with this same graphics card would probably not feel the snappiest, but we've achieved our goal. We found out that 95 on a 386, even with more RAM, is just not the best experience, which I think most people probably could have figured, but we got it down on record for science, because this was definitely scientific.